Tom Miller stood proudly beside his small ficus tree, carefully misting its leaves with a spray bottle as he prepared for another day of diplomatic meetings on the Galactic Council's station. The tree, barely 3 feet tall, had been his constant companion for the past 5 years, traveling with him from Earth to this massive space station where he served as humanity's first ambassador. He didn't expect the small plant to cause such a commotion. The morning started normally enough. Tom adjusted his uniform, checked that his translator was working, and gave the ficus one last spray of water. The plant's leaves sparkled under the artificial lighting, making it look particularly healthy and vibrant. The door chimed, announcing the arrival of the alien delegation right on schedule. As the door slid open, Ambassador Krill, a tall blue-skinned being with 4 arms and metallic scales, led a group of 5 other alien representatives into the room. "Welcome to my quarters," Tom said warmly, bowing slightly as was customary. "I thought we could have our preliminary discussions in a more relaxed setting." The aliens didn't respond. All 6 of them had frozen in the doorway, their eyes, ranging from 2 to 8 per individual, fixed on the innocent-looking ficus in the corner. "Ambassador Miller," Krill finally spoke, his translator making his voice sound like rattling pebbles, "there appears to be an untamed piece of vegetation in your living space." Tom looked at his plant, then back at the aliens. "Oh, that's just my ficus. Would you like some tea while we talk?" The word tea caused visible distress among the delegation. One of the smaller aliens, a green-colored being with antenna-like appendages, started trembling. "You mean to tell us," Krill said slowly, taking a step backward, "that you willingly keep wild flora in your personal quarters, and you consume plant-based substances?" Tom couldn't help but chuckle, which only seemed to disturb the aliens more. "It's not wild. It's a houseplant. Most humans keep them. They're perfectly safe and help make a space feel more like home." The delegation huddled together near the door, whispering frantically among themselves. Their translator devices caught fragments of their conversation. Deathworld species, completely insane, and they sleep near it. Trying to ease their concerns, Tom walked over to his ficus and gently touched one of its leaves. The aliens gasped in unison. "See, it's completely harmless. Sometimes I even talk to it." That was apparently the wrong thing to say. 2 of the alien delegates fainted on the spot, while Ambassador Krill's scales turned from their usual metallic blue to a pale white. "You communicate with it," Krill whispered in horror. "Well, not like actual conversation," Tom tried to explain, realizing too late he was only making things worse. "It's more like encouragement. It helps them grow better. It responds to verbal stimulation." Another delegate squeaked, their tentacles curling in fear. "And you deliberately encourage its growth." The next few minutes were chaos. The alien delegation called for an emergency security team, who arrived wearing what appeared to be hazmat suits. They insisted on scanning the ficus while keeping a distance of at least 10 feet. Tom watched in bewilderment as his simple houseplant was declared a Class 3 biological hazard due to its aggressive oxygen production and unpredictable growth patterns. By the end of the day, news had spread throughout the station. Humans, the crazy Deathworlders, didn't just survive alongside dangerous flora. They intentionally brought it into their homes, talked to it, and even had a whole industry dedicated to breeding and selling these domestic predatory plants. As Tom sat in his quarters that evening, looking at his now infamous ficus, he couldn't help but smile. If they were this worried about a simple houseplant, he wondered how they'd react when they learned about human gardens. Maybe he'd wait a while before mentioning his mother's rose bushes back on Earth. He gave the ficus one last spray of water before bed, whispering, "Well, buddy, looks like we're going to be the talk of the station for a while." Somewhere in the station's security center, alarms went off as sensors detected human-plant communication in progress. The Galactic Council's main laboratory buzzed with nervous energy as 3 of the most respected xenobotanists in the galaxy prepared to examine Earth's common houseplants. After the incident with Ambassador Miller's ficus, the council had demanded a full scientific investigation of these domestic flora specimens. Dr. Zix, the lead scientist with translucent skin that showed his nervous system glowing in patterns, approached the sealed container holding the small cactus. His assistant stood ready with a data pad, keeping a safe distance of 20 feet. Beginning examination of specimen type C157, locally known as cactus, Dr. Zix spoke into his recorder. Initial observations show aggressive defensive structures covering the entire surface. His colleague, Dr. Bloom, who, despite her Earth-like name, was a floating cloud of purple gas contained in a protective suit, hovered closer to take readings. Remarkable. The specimen has developed crystalline projectiles capable of piercing organic matter, and the humans claim to keep these in their sleeping quarters. The third scientist, Dr. Rhett, a being made of living crystal, carefully scanned the other samples. His faceted surface flickered with light patterns showing his growing concern. Colleagues, my readings indicate that all these specimens actively produce and release oxygen. The room fell silent. Even the junior assistants stopped taking notes. Oxygen. Dr. Bloom's gaseous form swirled anxiously, the highly reactive gas, and humans willingly allow these chemical warfare agents in their homes. Dr. Zix moved to examine a small Venus flytrap, his translucent skin now glowing bright orange with stress. The motion sensors detected movement within the plant, causing all emergency containment systems to activate. By the Grand Nebula, he exclaimed, jumping back. This specimen appears to be actively hunting. It has developed specialized trap mechanisms and produces digestive enzymes. The humans labeled this one as cute. The investigation continued for hours. Each new discovery led to more concern and confusion. The scientists found that many houseplants contained various toxins, while others could cause skin irritation. Some even released airborne spores for reproduction. Look at these readings, Dr. Rhett said, analyzing a common peace lily. This specimen, which humans often give as gifts, contains calcium oxalate crystals. They give these to each other as presents. The final report took 3 days to compile. The xenobotanists had to create entirely new classification categories for Earth's houseplants. The findings were presented to the Galactic Council in a special session. Distinguished council members, Dr. Zix began, his skin now a professional shade of blue. Our investigation has revealed disturbing facts about human cohabitation with dangerous flora. He displayed a hologram showing various common houseplants. These specimens demonstrate multiple threat categories: chemical warfare through oxygen production, physical defensive structures, toxic compounds, and even active predation of other life forms. The council chamber erupted in concerned murmuring. Furthermore, Dr. Bloom added, her gaseous form rippling with academic excitement, humans have developed ritualistic behaviors around these organisms. They provide them with nutrients, regularly hydrate them, and even engage in one-way verbal communication. Dr. Rhett projected data showing the average number of plants per human household. Most concerning is the scale of this practice. It's not isolated to a few risk-taking individuals. It appears to be a species-wide behavior. The Council voted unanimously to classify all Earth houseplants as Class 3 biological hazards. They also established new safety protocols for any human quarters on space stations or alien worlds. Back in his lab, Dr. Zix was finishing the last of his notes when a human botanist walked in carrying a small potted herb garden. The scientist's skin turned completely white as the human cheerfully explained it was just some basic cooking herbs. Cooking herbs? Dr. Zix's translator struggled to process this concept. You mean, you not only keep these specimens in your homes, you intentionally consume them. The human's casual nod caused 3 nearby assistants to faint. Dr. Zix quickly added a footnote to his report. Further investigation needed regarding human dietary practices involving potentially hazardous flora. Then he too fainted, his skin flashing all colors of the spectrum as he hit the floor. The emergency meeting room of the Galactic Council station was packed with representatives from 30 different species. They had gathered to address what many were now calling the human vegetation crisis. The room buzzed with nervous energy as Dr. Lisa Woods, Earth's leading botanical expert, set up her presentation. What made everyone particularly nervous was the large bamboo palm sitting peacefully in the corner of her podium. "Please remove that thing before we begin," requested Council Member Drix, his crystalline body flickering with anxiety patterns. Lisa smiled warmly. "The plant is part of my demonstration. I assure you it's perfectly safe." She reached for a small watering can, causing several aliens to duck under their seats. "It just needs a little water." "She's feeding it in public," whispered one horrified delegate to another. "Is this some kind of power move?" The large display screen activated, showing pictures of various Earth homes filled with plants. Each new image caused more distress among the alien representatives. "As you can see," Lisa began, "humans have kept plants in their homes for thousands of years. They help clean our air, provide aesthetic beauty, and—" "They clean your air," interrupted Council Member Vax, their gelatinous form quivering. "You mean to tell us these organisms actively modify your atmosphere?" Lisa nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, they absorb carbon dioxide and release oxygen. They're essential for—" The room erupted in chaos. 3 delegates immediately requested emergency evacuation. The small floating alien fainted and had to be caught in a gravity field. "Order! Order in the committee!" shouted the head council member, thumping their appendage on the table. "Dr. Woods, are you saying humans intentionally use these organisms for atmospheric manipulation?" "Well, yes," Lisa replied, genuinely puzzled by their reaction. "They're very efficient at it. Some people even keep them in their bedrooms to improve air quality while they sleep." The entire left side of the room emptied as delegates scrambled for the exit. Those who remained were either too shocked to move or recording everything for their species warning archives. Lisa continued her presentation, moving to a slide showing a typical office space. Many humans keep plants at their workstations. Studies show they increase productivity and they bring these biological manipulators to their work environments. A mechanical-based life form screeched. "How do they maintain focus with a predatory species sitting next to them?" "Oh, they're not predatory," Lisa laughed, then paused. "Well, except for the Venus flytraps. But those are just for fun." The phrase "just for fun" had to be translated 3 times because many species couldn't believe they heard it correctly the first 2 times. Lisa walked over to her bamboo palm and adjusted a leaf. "Look how harmless they are. Some people even name their plants. This one is Bob. It is a designation," someone shouted from the back. "They're giving them identities now." The head council member raised all 4 of their appendages for silence. "Dr. Woods, let me understand this clearly. Humans name these organisms, speak to them, keep them in sleep chambers, and use them to modify their environments. Willingly. Don't forget we also breed them to make new varieties." Lisa added helpfully, "My mother creates hybrid roses. She's won awards for her new colors and petal arrangements." The word hybrid caused another wave of panic. The concept that humans were actively breeding new varieties of these dangerous organisms was too much for many to handle. "This committee meeting is suspended," announced the head council member. "We need to establish new safety protocols immediately. And someone please get Dr. Woods a security escort. She's clearly been under the influence of these organisms for too long." As the room cleared out, Lisa sat down next to Bob the bamboo palm, pulling out her tablet to write a message to Earth's diplomatic office. "Well, that could have gone better," she said to the plant. "Maybe I shouldn't mention the community gardens yet." From the security room, watching through cameras, 3 alien officers filed an urgent report about another human-plant communication incident, this time from a suspected plant cult leader. The galactic safety officers stood outside Earth's largest botanical garden in New York, their protective suits gleaming in the morning sun. Officer Peak, the squad leader, checked his hazard detector one more time before addressing his team. "Remember, our mission is to rescue any humans trapped inside this plant prison," he said, his antenna twitching nervously. "According to our intelligence, hundreds of humans enter this facility daily, and many never come out." What the aliens didn't realize was that those humans were actually just garden employees going to work. Inside the garden, Mike the head gardener was giving a tour to a group of school children when the chaos began. He had just finished explaining how to properly prune a rosebush when the glass ceiling shattered above them. Alien rescue teams descended on cables, their hazmat suits making them look like giant glowing bubbles. "Remain calm, humans. We are here to save you from the vegetation." The children, rather than being scared, burst into delighted giggles. One small boy pointed up and asked, "Are they also here to learn about photosynthesis?" Officer Peak landed near a large oak tree and immediately marked it as massive Class 4 biological threat on his scanner. His team spread out through the garden, placing warning beacons around every plant they encountered. "Sir," called one of his officers, "these humans are deliberately growing thorn specimens, and they're transforming them into shapes." Mike tried to explain that topiary was an art form, but this only made things worse. "You're telling me," Officer Peak's translator crackled with disbelief, "that humans capture and torture plants by cutting them into unnatural forms for entertainment?" The situation grew even more complicated when they reached the orchid house. The alien rescue team was baffled by the careful climate control and specialized care given to what they termed atmospheric manipulation organisms. "They're breeding them," another officer reported in horror. "They're selecting for stronger specimens and creating new variants." Meanwhile, news of the rescue operation had spread, and reporters began gathering outside the garden. The sight of humans calmly explaining plant cultivation to increasingly distressed alien officers made for excellent headlines. "Look," Mike said patiently to Officer Peak, pointing to a beautiful rose garden. "These plants aren't dangerous. They're beautiful. People come here to enjoy their colors and smells." "You mean to tell me," Officer Peak's antenna went completely straight with shock, "that humans deliberately expose themselves to plant-generated chemical compounds for pleasure?" The situation reached its peak when they discovered the garden's research laboratory. The sight of humans carefully collecting and storing plant genetic material caused a full-scale panic among the alien officers. "They're weaponizing them," screamed one officer, watching a botanist carefully pollinate a rare flower species. "They're helping them reproduce." It took 3 hours, 4 diplomatic calls, and one very patient botanical professor to explain that the garden was not, in fact, a biological weapons facility or a plant prison. Rather, it was a place of education, research, and preservation. The alien officers finally stood down, though they insisted on placing extreme biological hazard warning beacons at every entrance. They couldn't understand why humans were taking selfies with these signs. As the rescue team prepared to leave, a small girl tugged on Officer Peak's protective suit and handed him a daisy she had picked. The alien officer froze, holding the tiny flower as if it might explode. "It's a gift," she explained cheerfully. "You can put it in water and it'll live for days." Officer Peak's report to the Galactic Council later that day included a new and terrifying discovery. Humans are now teaching their young to distribute potentially harmful flora to unsuspecting species. The children appear to have been thoroughly indoctrinated into the plant cult, showing no fear of even the most aggressive specimens. The daisy, however, remained in a small container on Officer Peak's desk back at the station, carefully hidden from his superiors. Sometimes, when no one was looking, he would lean in close and try to understand what humans saw in these strange Earth organisms. He still wrote daily reports about its suspicious activities, just to be safe. The annual Galactic Embassy Christmas party was supposed to be a simple cultural exchange event. That was until the humans decided to follow their traditional decorations to the letter. Jack Parker, the embassy's event coordinator, stood proudly next to the 7-foot Norwegian spruce he had specially transported to the space station. He was hanging the last of the twinkling lights when the first alien ambassador walked in and immediately triggered the station's emergency alarm. Alert. Alert. UNCON TNED Forest Predator in DA Diplomatic CC2R. Within minutes, the embassy's main hall was surrounded by security forces in protective gear. Ambassador Krill, who had somewhat recovered from the ficus incident months ago, pressed himself against the far wall. "Parker," he said through chattering mandibles, "please tell me you haven't brought an entire tree into our secure facility." "Of course I did," Jack beamed, adjusting a shiny red ornament. "It's not Christmas without a Christmas tree." The security team's leader stepped forward, scanner beeping wildly. "Our readings indicate this specimen is over 7 feet tall and actively producing oxygen. And, by the cosmic void, are those LIGHTS wrapped around it. They're LED lights," Jack explained helpfully. "Don't worry, they're not hot enough to bother the tree." "You are EQONCERNED about the tree's QMMFORT," shrieked one of the security officers. The situation grew more complicated as other human embassy staff arrived, carrying boxes of decorations. The aliens watched in horror as humans casually approached the massive plant and began hanging various objects on its branches. "They're adorning it with metallic artifacts," whispered one alien scientist, frantically taking notes. "Perhaps some form of ritual sacrifice." Ambassador Krill, trying to maintain diplomatic composure, asked, "Parker, why exactly have you brought this specimen into our facility?" "It's tradition," Jack said, placing a star on top of the tree. "We put up a tree, decorate it, and exchange gifts under it during Christmas." The word "under" caused visible distress among the alien diplomats. "You deliberately placed valuable items beneath this creature." Ambassador Krill's translator struggled to convey his disbelief. "What purpose does this serve?" Before Jack could explain about Santa Claus, which would have undoubtedly caused an interstellar incident, more human staff arrived with additional decorations. One carried a spray bottle. "No," shouted the security team leader. "Step away from the vegetation. It's already displaying aggressive growth patterns." "It's just water," explained Mary from accounting, giving the tree a light mist. "Keeps it fresh longer." You are trying to prolong its life." The security team began evacuating the nearest offices. The situation reached its peak when someone plugged in the lights, making the tree twinkle with multiple colors. 3 alien diplomats fainted on the spot, while others began transmitting urgent messages to their homeworlds about possible human bioweapon capabilities. "Look how pretty it is," Jack said proudly, completely oblivious to the panic around him. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session to address what they termed the maximum size vegetation incident. They were particularly concerned about reports that humans commonly brought these giant specimens into their homes and gathered their young around them. The final report, filed by a team of xenoanthropologists, read, "Humans display ritualistic behavior involving the capture and decoration of large forest organisms. They appear to worship these beings by offering them water and adorning them with artificial illumination and metallic tributes. Most concerning is their practice of gathering offspring near these specimens during a festival period known as Christmas." Despite the panic, some younger alien diplomats showed curious interest in the decorated tree. A few even secretly took pictures with it, although they claimed it was for scientific documentation only. Jack's tree remained up for the full 12 days of Christmas, under constant surveillance by a nervous security team. He swore he once caught Officer Peak placing a small gift under it, though the alien officer vehemently denied any such dangerous cultural contamination. The tree was later added to the station's list of suspicious human activities, Right below, keeping smaller plants as pets, and above, intentionally growing food in personal spaces. Dr. Venn, the Galactic Council's lead xenobiologist, sat in his observation pod, watching humans tend to their garden in the station's new biodome. After months of studying human-plant interactions, he was finally beginning to see patterns that made sense. Well, almost made sense. Fascinating, he muttered into his recorder, his crystalline form glowing with scientific curiosity. The humans appear to be conducting their daily ritual of plant maintenance. Through the safety glass, he watched as Mark, the biodome's head gardener, carefully pruned a tomato plant. What had once terrified Dr. Venn now intrigued him. He had learned that humans didn't just keep plants. They formed genuine relationships with them. Subject is removing excess growth from the specimen, Dr. Venn noted. Previous observations suggest this actually benefits the organism's health, despite appearing hostile at first glance. His assistant, Officer Peak, recently transferred from security after the Christmas tree incident, stood nearby. The officer still wore his protective suit, but he had at least stopped flinching every time a leaf moved. "Sir," Peak said, checking his monitors, "you might want to see this. The oxygen levels in the biodome are optimal for human life." Dr. Venn's crystalline surface flickered with excitement. "Exactly. We've been looking at this all wrong. These plants aren't weapons. They're terraforming tools." Just then, they observed something that would have caused a station-wide panic just a few months ago. A human child entered the biodome carrying a small watering can. "Look," Dr. Venn pointed, "the humans are teaching their young about plant care. It's not indoctrination as we feared. It's education about ecological balance." The child carefully watered a row of flowers, while Mark explained something about photosynthesis. Dr. Venn had learned this term, along with many others, during his research. He now understood that the human practice of gardening wasn't about breeding biological weapons. It was about maintaining life. However, just as the aliens were getting comfortable with regular plants, they discovered something that tested their newfound understanding: carnivorous plants. "Dr. Venn," Peak called out in alarm, "the humans are introducing new specimens to Section C. They appear to be predatory." Dr. Venn hurried to observe as station botanist Lisa Woods set up a display of Venus flytraps and pitcher plants. His previous research had prepared him for this, but it was still shocking to see plants that actively trapped and consumed prey. "How can you keep such aggressive specimens?" Peak asked Lisa through the intercom. Lisa smiled, holding up a Venus flytrap. "They're actually quite gentle. They only eat insects, and they're really picky about their food. Want to come in and see one up close?" Peak backed away so quickly he bumped into 3 different monitoring stations. Dr. Venn, however, found himself moving closer to the glass. "Remarkable. The humans have domesticated predatory flora for educational purposes." As they watched, Lisa fed a fly to one of the Venus flytraps. Several alien observers who had gathered behind Dr. Venn gasped as the trap closed. Note for the record, Dr. Venn spoke into his recorder. "Humans appear to derive entertainment from watching predatory plants consume prey. This may explain their comfort with keeping larger specimens as pets." By the end of the day, Dr. Venn had compiled enough data to write a groundbreaking paper titled "Understanding Human-Plant Symbiosis: A New Perspective on Terrestrial Ecological Relationships." The paper caused quite a stir in the galactic scientific community, especially its controversial conclusion. Humans have not merely adapted to their dangerous flora, they have formed a complex, mutually beneficial relationship with it. Their ability to cultivate and coexist with these organisms suggests an evolutionary advantage we may need to reevaluate. As Dr. Venn finished his day's observations, he noticed something strange on his desk: a small potted succulent with a note from Lisa that read, "For beginners, very hard to kill." He considered calling security, but instead, he just moved the pot a little closer to his light source. for scientific purposes, of course. The grand opening of the Interspecies Botanical Cultural Center on the Galactic Council's main station drew an unexpectedly large crowd. Aliens from across the galaxy had come to witness what many called the most dangerous tourist attraction in known space: humans interacting with their plant pets in a controlled environment. Behind the reinforced observation glass, Tom Miller's famous ficus tree sat in a position of honor. The same plant that had started this whole interstellar incident 6 months ago was now the star attraction, complete with its own information plaque and security detail. As you can see, tour guide Pete explained to a group of wide-eyed alien visitors, "This is a typical human-plant interaction zone. Note how the human shows no fear while approaching the specimen." The aliens watched in fascination as Tom casually watered his ficus. Several of them recorded the moment on their devices, while others pressed against the glass for a better view. "Is it true," asked a floating gas-based being, "that this particular vegetation has its own social media following?" "Over 2 million followers across the galaxy," Pete confirmed proudly, "though most of them are watching to see if it finally attacks." The cultural center had several sections, each more thrilling than the last for the alien visitors. The common houseplant display showed various plants in typical human home settings. The active gardening zone featured humans actually touching and pruning plants, which never failed to draw gasps from the audience. But the real excitement came from the newly opened extreme botany section. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all designations," Pete announced, "please prepare yourselves for our next exhibit, human children planting seeds." The crowd rushed to the viewing area, extra security barriers automatically deploying to handle the surge. Through the glass, they watched as a group of elementary school students learned about growing vegetables. "Absolutely incredible," whispered Dr. Venn, who had become something of a celebrity himself after his groundbreaking paper on human-plant relationships. "They're teaching the young ones to create new plant life without any protective equipment." The cultural center had become so popular that it needed a reservation system. Alien tourists would wait months just to see humans doing ordinary garden activities. The gift shop couldn't keep enough. I survived watching human gardening merchandise in stock. Even Officer Peak had undergone a remarkable transformation. Though he still wore his protective suit, he now led the Introduction to Safe Plant Observation courses for nervous first-time visitors. His personal succulent collection, while technically classified as controlled specimens, had grown to 3 plants. "Remember," he would tell his classes, "humans have evolved alongside these organisms. Do not attempt to recreate their actions without proper training and authorization." The center's success led to unexpected diplomatic benefits. Several alien species began to reconsider their stance on biological cooperation after seeing how humans had turned potentially dangerous flora into beneficial companions. Tom's ficus, now nicknamed the Ambassador, had inspired a whole new field of tenobotanical diplomacy. Some alien diplomats even started requesting small, heavily contained plants for their own offices, though most kept them behind blast-proof barriers. As the center celebrated its successful first month, the staff gathered for a small party. They had a cake decorated with a plant design, which had to be explained multiple times to alien visitors as not containing actual plant material. And even Dr. Venn attended, his crystalline form glowing with pride next to his small succulent collection. "You know," Tom said, adjusting a leaf on his famous ficus, "when I first brought this little guy to the station, I never thought it would lead to all this." Speaking of which, Pete added with a grin, "Wait until they see next week's new exhibit, Extreme Sports, Humans Who Climb Trees." The security team, overhearing this, immediately began drafting new safety protocols and requesting additional barriers. As the party continued, the ficus sat contentedly in its place of honor, blissfully unaware of its role in reshaping galactic diplomacy. And somewhere in the station's social media center, its follower count ticked up another 1,000, as beings across the galaxy tuned in to watch the most famous plant in space continue to not eat its human caretaker.